So the AdvanceHE hasn't yet identified specifically what their expectations are in terms of good standing. It's left to institutions largely. I think what is interesting is to think a little bit about good standing in terms of ensuring that you are providing continuing evidence year on year that you are operating within your particular category at a very high level. So keeping your evidence over a number of years is an important aspect to that. Every year you should be able to say, I am operating within a fellowship category or senior fellowship category, and I've got evidence to show for that, using the UK PSF as my benchmark. There are certainly some appraisal systems in universities that make use of that. There are certainly, unfortunately, as I said, there are certainly some promotional systems that do it rather crudely, but certainly it does provide an incentive to make sure that you are operating within a particular category in a sustained way. So keeping your evidence over years is important. Look afresh at your portfolio of evidence. Basically, when you look back at something you did 2 years ago and you think, actually, now in the light of things that have happened since in my institution or within my discipline, or I went to that conference and this has happened, I'm going to basically pick that up and I'm going to tweak it. So very often building on what you already have in terms of evidence generates, of course, new evidence. Sharing some of your evidence with colleagues. If you've done something that you think is quite interesting, but you didn't really feel it was appropriate to share, then you go to a conference and you think, actually, I've already done that. The guy that's showing me that, I've done something very similar. Share it. Either publish it internally, just produce a discussion paper, share it with colleagues in a module team meeting, a program team meeting, at a school meeting, a departmental meeting. Share it. It's about getting into the habit of sharing information. And don't ever rest on your laurels. As I've said repeatedly this week, it's very important that we are all in an enhancement mode all the time. So it's not enough to think, okay, I've made fellow, I can now sit back and just be a fellow. You have to operate in that category using the UK PSF in a sustained way. I suggest having a poster of the UK PSF on the wall is not a bad start, actually, providing it just doesn't become wall furniture. If you make a point of maybe discussing it, there's certainly some people I've worked with where I've encouraged them to pick up one or two of the elements in the UK PSF and discuss it at a school board meeting, and just get feedback on people, arguably asking whether or not people feel supported in providing that evidence. Very often, of course, you have to be careful. Very often you end up going down the rabbit warren of people saying, there's no support for me to go to conferences. I want to go to a conference in Antarctica and no one's willing to fund me for it. But the argument would be that if you routinely review departmental program practice against the UK PSF, that's a good way to make sure that you are at least being supported. And where possible, use institutional repositories and platforms where they exist. I realise a lot of institutions don't necessarily have good access to digital platforms, but certainly there are some institutions that have HR systems that allow you to store individual evidence. Certainly good appraisal systems that are more reflective. I realise that's a little bit of an ask, but if you are in a position to record your peer observations, your appraisals and so on, I would suggest that could be part of an evidence base. You're not likely to submit those for appraisal, for recognition, but they provide a basis for future reflection. So we're going to do an activity this afternoon, and we're going to look in more detail at the UK dimensions of practice. That I think is the poster that we all ought to have on our wall.